Hello, this is David, and I'm re-releasing the video, The Star of the King. It got taken down for a little petty offense, but it's just too good to leave off the internet, especially since I think today, the third day of the 7th month of Tishri in the Hebrew calendar, is the birthday of Yeshua. And I think we can prove it. And this video is really important because it covers things that nobody else really, they don't conclusively show the proof. And you know, Psalm 89 says the moon is a faithful and silent witness. And that's what we have to take into consideration when we look at what did the Babylonian magi, what were they looking for? What was important to them in their culture? We can't just pick all these two bright stars came together and that had to be the star of the king or the star of Bethlehem. What did they look for? What was important to the Babylonians? And once we see that, we see the moon was crucial. That was their main god. It was the father of both the sun and Venus in their theology. So we got to look at the moon, and it actually eclipsed the king star 4 times over about a 9-month period. That's pretty significant. So the first thing they saw was what the moon did. And then the moon eclipsed the sun, and then the moon eclipsed Jupiter. So we need to look at what they were looking at and what was the star of the king, and we can pinpoint an event that fits the description of the Star of Bethlehem. But there's more to that because we can go forward to 32 AD, the 7th month, April the 14th, and that's exactly 33 years and 7 months from the birthday of Yeshua. And that's the time we would expect when he was crucified. And you know what happened in 32 AD? On Passover, there was a lunar eclipse for 6 hours, exactly at the same time that Yeshua was on the cross. It's just uncanny. You can't make this up. And so this data needs to be known. And then when you go backwards in time from this king star appearance, you go back 9 months, and what do you have? You have the first day of Hanukkah. And that's when Yeshua would have been conceived. The light of the world came to us on the first day of Hanukkah, the light, this festival of lights. So we're re-releasing this. I hope you enjoy it, and God bless. Oh, one more thing. Don't forget to get the free ebook in the link below. It's totally free, or if you want to buy it on Kindle and Amazon, everything is documented if you want to go down and drill it down to the details. So that's available. Hope you enjoy it. The birth of the Messiah is probably the most beloved story ever told. Every year, plays and reenactments portray this manger scene of baby Yeshua with his parents, Joseph and Miriam, and the nearby shepherds who were notified by an angel that that very day a Savior was born who was the Messiah. And an integral part of this story is always included: the appearing of wise men from the east and a mysterious star which led them to the scene. An amazing fact is that the story of the star is only recorded once in the book of Matthew. No other sources mention the wise men or the star. Why? The Jewish historian Josephus writes about a prophecy of a coming ruler from Israel and the excitement of the Jews when they saw a comet, apparently thinking that it was the prophesied star. We know today that this was a comet Josephus referred to, Comet 1P, Halley. The 1P stands for the first periodic comet ever discovered. This comet makes a pass by the Earth about every 75 years. The Chinese were the first to record its appearance in 240 BCE, before the Common Era. This photo is of Comet Halley's last flyby in 1986. Its appearance then was not as spectacular as it was in ancient times when it startled the masses. What is very interesting is that this comet made a close approach to Earth in the years 65 and 66. Here's what the Chinese recorded. In the 8th year of Young Ping, the 6th month, a comet appeared in Hydra and passed through Leo, visible for 56 days. In the 12th month, on the day of Usay, a new star appeared in the east sky. It's from the Annal of Latte Han. The comet was first seen from late July to mid-October in the year 65, and after Halley's comet passed around the sun, it reappeared again as a new star on January 31st in the year 66. Note that it was visible over a 6-month period and then had reappeared to be visible for even longer. And most importantly, the comet passed to the constellation of Leo the Lion, and it reappeared in the east. As we will see, this is exactly what the Jews were looking for. Now let's look at Josephus' account of this same comet that the Chinese documented. Thus, there was a star resembling a sword, which stood over the city, and a comet that continued a whole year. But now, what did the most elevate them in undertaking this war was an ambiguous oracle that was also found in their sacred writings, how, about that time, one from their country should become governor of the habitable earth. Josephus is saying that an ambiguous prophecy about a coming ruler from Israel was the main reason for the Jewish rebellion against the Romans. But why did they rebel at this time? This prophecy had been around for 1400 years. As we will see, this prophecy not only mentions a coming king from Israel, but it also mentions a star. And not just a star, but a star that rises out of a lion. The Jews thought that Comet Halley was a sign of their coming Messiah. They started revolting the year the comet appeared and continued on for 3 more years. And what did the Romans do? Josephus states that the Romans leveled both the temple and Jerusalem to the dirt. Caesar gave orders that they should now demolish the entire city and temple. It was so thoroughly laid even with the ground by those that dug it up to the foundation that there was left nothing to make those that came thither believe it had ever been inhabited. That's devastation. He goes on to say that the Romans even dug up every tree for a 10-mile radius. Here's what Yeshua prophesied 38 years earlier. For days will come upon you when your enemies will build an embankment around you, surround you, and close you in on every side, and level you and your children within you to the ground. That's exactly what happened. And they will not leave in you one stone upon another, because you did not know the time of your visitation. Yeshua prophesied exactly what Josephus described. The city was going to be leveled to the ground. And why? Because they did not know the time of their visitation. It was a timing issue. Their timing was off. The Jews had missed the real star that appeared when Yeshua's birth was 66 years earlier, and now they mistook Halley's comet for the star of the Messiah. Historically, comets have never been viewed as signs of kings. Comets have always been seen as signs of destruction. Think about it. This whole tragedy was caused by a comet. This proves that the star that appeared at Yeshua's birth could not have been a spectacular event. If it were, the masses would have revolted 66 years earlier, and the Romans would have destroyed Jerusalem 66 years earlier, leaving no temple and no place for the Messiah to minister and be crucified. It would have negated God's whole redemption plan. God had to make the star of the Messiah a covert operation. The reason that we have only one account in Matthew of the star and wise men is because it was not a well-known event. In fact, the Magi were the only ones to see the star. To everyone else, the sky appeared perfectly normal, with nothing out of the ordinary. Only the well-trained eye of the avid astronomers could detect the subtle differences that had happened. The wise men had to come from the region of Babylonia. This region is the same area that's called ancient Sumer. Here we find the earliest cities of civilization. Not only is this area due east of Jerusalem, but it has a well-documented history of producing the world's first astronomers. This area was also very familiar with the Hebrew people. Nebuchadnezzar had taken the entire Israeli nation here as captives 600 years earlier. The wise men showed that they were familiar with the messianic prophecy, which they had to have learned from the Jews. It's entirely possible that the Magi could have been Jews themselves. A lot of the Jews remained behind in Babylon after the captivity, and they never returned. The Magi used Babylonian astronomy methods, which could only have come from the area of Babylonia. For example, the importance of a star rising with the sun in the east was of paramount importance to the Babylonians. The wise men could not have been Chinese. The Chinese used different techniques and concentrated on monitoring circumpolar stars. Those are the stars that revolve around the North Star, and they never go below the horizon. They were not interested in the stars rising with the sun. And finally, the residents in this region were familiar with the God of Israel, Yehovah. Their first encounter came around 2100 BCE at the Tower of Babel, where Yehovah decided to break up their one-world government by mixing up their languages. And 1300 years later, God asked the prophet Jonah to go to this area. Jonah was reluctant to go at first, but after spending 3 days inside a great fish, he had a change of attitude. Yehovah sent Jonah specifically to Nineveh, the largest city in the world, located 200 miles to the north of Babylon on the eastern bank of the Tigris River. Nineveh was the capital of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, the largest empire in the world at that time. Jonah was now highly motivated to preach with great fervor. Now Nineveh was an exceedingly great city, a 3-day journey in extent. And Jonah began to enter the city on the first day's walk. Then he cried out and said, "Yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown." Jonah had ventured only 1/3 of the way across Nineveh. The following day, just before noon, Nineveh experienced a total solar eclipse on June 15th, 763 BCE. This must have absolutely terrified the people. Documenting the exact time of ancient eclipses is not an exact science, and NASA's data estimates that the Earth's rotation has slowed down by about 6 hours over 2,700 years. This estimate could easily be off by an hour, which would shift the eclipse shadow right on top of Nineveh. And that's probably what had happened. But even as it is now, as pictured, Nineveh would still have had a 99% eclipse because it's only 30 miles away from the total eclipse shadow. So the people of Nineveh believed God and proclaimed a fast and put on sackcloth from the greatest to the least of them. Then word came to the king of Nineveh, and he arose from his throne and laid aside his robe, covered himself with sackcloth, and sat in ashes. And he caused it to be proclaimed and published throughout Nineveh by the decree of the king and by his nobles, saying, "Let neither man nor beast, herd nor flock taste anything. Do not let them eat or drink water, but let man and beast be covered with sackcloth, and cry mightily to God. Yes, let every one turn from his evil way and from the violence that is in his hands. Who can tell if God will turn and repent and turn away from his fierce anger, so that we may not perish?" This shows the degree of panic that had engulfed the people. Even the animals had to fast. Nowhere else has such a dramatic response been recorded. These guys were serious. They were terrified. It also shows the degree of respect that they had towards Jehovah and his power to destroy them. Then God saw their works, that they turned from their evil way, and God relented from the disaster that he had said he would bring upon them, and he did not do it. This gave Nineveh a 150-year reprieve and allowed King Ashurbanipal 100 years later to collect more than 30,000 clay tablets from all over the Mesopotamian region into the first modern library that the world had ever seen. The library's cuneiform tablets were cataloged by subject and stored in separate reading rooms, which became the pattern for future libraries. In 612 BCE, Nineveh was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar II's father, Nabopolassar, with a confederation of Medes, Persians, and Babylonians. The capital of this Neo-Babylonian empire was moved 200 miles south to Babylon, located on the banks of the Euphrates River. Nebuchadnezzar II ascended to the throne in 605 BCE. Shortly thereafter, he made his first siege of Jerusalem and took Daniel and his friends back to Babylon. Daniel was soon faced with the impossible task of interpreting a dream that Nebuchadnezzar couldn't even remember himself. After Daniel successfully told the dream and the interpretation, Nebuchadnezzar said, "Truly, your God is the God of gods," and he made Daniel ruler over the province of Babylon. Daniel got his 3 friends high positions in Babylon too. But when Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah refused to worship a 90-foot-tall gold statue, they were thrown into a furnace. Nebuchadnezzar himself witnessed the event and was astonished to see 4 men in the fire, not 3. And the 4th man looked like the Son of God. Nebuchadnezzar stated, "No other God who can deliver like this." When Daniel was about 80 years old, a new king, Darius, became ruler. Darius was tricked into making a law that no one could worship any other god for 30 days. And when Daniel was caught praying, he was sentenced to be cast into a den of lions. After Daniel being found unharmed the next day, Darius proclaimed, "I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom, men must tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God." Daniel stayed in positions of high authority all his life. He was the chief administrator over all the wise men of Babylon. Future astrologers would certainly have learned about him and the prophecies of his God. Cuneiform clay tablets have been discovered from the library of Ashurbanipal in Nineveh, as well as this one from southern Iraq, which contain the most comprehensive Babylonian star and constellation catalog in existence. This is all that we have. The information on these tablets is just about all that we know about the early astronomers from 612 BCE back to the beginning of creation. They are named Mul-Apin tablets after the first 2 words which refer to the first star on their list, the plow star. This is referring to Triangulum, which is shaped like a plow, and it is right above Aries, which today is considered the first constellation of the zodiac. A closer look at this star catalog gives us some pertinent information on the mindset of the Magi. In column 1, line number 9 reads, "Star, lion, front, star, king," which can be more easily translated as the king star in front of the lion constellation. The cuneiform symbols for king star are pronounced Mul Lugal, Mul meaning sparkle or star, and Lugal, Lu meaning man and Gal meaning great, so the great man is king. The interesting point about these symbols is that they are ancient Sumerian, meaning that this has been the name for the brightest star in the breast of the lion since the beginning of civilization. For 4,000 years, everyone knew about the king star. there really should be no question about what star the wise men were watching. Continuing on with column 1, lines 36 through 8 reference Jupiter as the star of Marduk. One big star, although its light is dim, divides the sky in half and stands there. That is, the star of the god Marduk, at the crossing point. Jupiter, it keeps changing its position and crosses the sky. The cuneiform symbols for Jupiter are Mul, Sag, May, Gar. As before, Mul is star, Sag means head, May means silence, and Gar means place. So they call Jupiter head of the silent place. Interestingly, Marduk was head of the pantheon, the temple for all the gods. This shows that Jupiter was seen as Marduk. Column 2, line 44 tells us when the king's star rises with the sun. On Abu 5, star bow and star king visible. In 1200 BCE, the king's star rose with the sun on July 20th of the Julian calendar, which was the 5th of Av on the Hebrew calendar, which is equal to Abu in Sumerian or Akkadian cuneiform. This gives us a rough idea of when this heliacal rising data was written, somewhere around 1200 BCE. In 2018, the king's star rises with the sun on August the 23rd, which is the 12th of Elul on the Hebrew calendar. So the rising has been delayed for over a month over the past 3,000 years. And actually on our current Gregorian calendar, it equals to a 45-day difference. In total, there are 4 sections of the Mul Apin catalog that deal with when these stars rise with the sun. Section 4 talks about the day of the month that we just saw. Section 5 tells us about the constellation positions. Section 6, the days between each star's rising with the sun. And Section 7, by looking at the stars at the meridian. This was a very important part of Babylonian astronomy. Column 4, lines 31 to 32, tell us about the path of the moon and the stars that are on it. The gods which stand on the path of the moon god, through which the moon passes in the course of a month, and which it touches are, line 34 lists, Mul Gula, which is the lion constellation. Mul means star, means dog, Gu means great, and La means one. So the great dog is a lion. This was another extremely important part of Babylonian astronomy. The moon god was their principal deity in the heavens. The Mul Apin star catalog defines the basics of Babylonian astronomy. These tablets are the most comprehensive ancient star catalog in existence. They give us the following important information concerning the mindset of the wise men. The moon is a god. Constellations are gods. And planets are gods. It is very important to be on the path of the moon. It is very important which stars the moon touches or eclipses. It is very important when a star rises with the sun. And it is very important to be on the path of the sun. The brightest star on the path of the sun is called the king's star, and the king's star is located in the lion constellation. Another insight into the importance of the celestial bodies can be gleaned from a look at this boundary marker from a rich suburb of southern Babylonia from around 1100 BCE, called the Kaduru boundary stone. Notice the 8-pointed star of Ishtar, or Venus, the goddess of fertility and war, on the left, the crescent of the moon god, Sin, in the center, and the solar disk of the sun god, Shemesh, on the right. You have to look to the right-hand side of the marker to see the triangular spade of Marduk, or Jupiter, and to the left is the wedge-shaped stylus of Nabu, or Mercury, the god of writing. The symbols of the most important Mesopotamian gods are therefore the most prominent: the star of Ishtar, the crescent moon, and the solar disk. In Babylonian mythology, however, the moon god is considered to be the father of both Ishtar, Venus, and the sun. So the moon really had the highest status of all. This should not be surprising, since we today have 1/4 of the world's population who still worship this crescent moon god, and most of them live in this same geographical area. This is perhaps the most important clue of all. The Magi were keenly watching the path of the moon, their most important deity. If we want to know what they were all excited about, we have to take a look at the path of the moon. The wise men apparently had access to a prophecy in the book of Numbers by a prophet called Balaam. This prophecy was so popular that it has been found in 4 different Dead Sea Scrolls. This was also the same prophecy earlier mentioned by Josephus, which caused the revolt against the Romans. But unlike the Jewish revolutionaries, the Magi were able to correctly interpret it. The Moabite king Balak hired prophet Balaam to curse Israel in 1405 BCE. This was the 40th year of their wandering in the wilderness. This same year, Israel would enter the promised land under a new leader, Joshua. And now, just before they're ready to gain the victory, a famous prophet is hired to curse them. Balaam means not of the people. He was not a Hebrew. However, he claimed that he knew Yehovah as his God. Balaam's reputation was noteworthy. Balak told him, "Therefore, please come at once. Curse this people for me, for they are too mighty for me. Perhaps I shall be able to defeat them and drive them out of the land. For I know that he whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed." Balak took Balaam to 3 different locations, trying to find a good one from which he could better curse Israel. At the second location, Mount Pisgah, Balaam started to prophesy about a king. Yehovah, his God, is with him, Israel, and the shout of a king is among them. Seeing that this location apparently was not working, and Balaam appeared to be blessing Israel, not cursing them, Balak took Balaam to a 3rd and final vantage point, Mount Peor. This is where Balaam gave the most precise details of a coming Messiah. And Balaam raised up his eyes and saw Israel encamped according to their tribes, and the Spirit of God came upon him. "How lovely are your tents, O Jacob, your dwellings, O Israel! God brings him out of Egypt. He has strength like a wild ox. He shall consume the nations, his enemies. He shall break their bones and pierce them with his arrows. He bows down. He lies down as a lion. And as a lion, who shall rouse him?" This is word for word the same blessing that Jacob gave to his 4th son, Judah. However, Balaam seems to be applying this to all of Israel now. He continues, "Blessed is he who blesses you, and cursed is he who curses you." Here's another prophecy verbatim for what God had said to Abram. He goes on, "I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob, a scepter shall rise out of Israel. Out of Jacob one shall have dominion." Balaam prophesied that Jacob, or Israel, was a crouching lion, a star shall come out of Jacob, and a future king or scepter will rise from Israel. Now, if you were a Babylonian astronomer and you heard about a crouching lion with a star coming out of it, which would be a king, and which will rise, what would you think? It would be obvious that this prophecy is alluding to the lion constellation, which is portrayed as a crouching lion. The lion constellation also has the king star, which was mentioned, and in Babylonian astronomy, the most important time was when the king star rises with the sun in the east. On the morning of July 28th, 3 BCE, the king star rose with the sun in the east. It was deemed to be very important which other planets were near a star upon its heliacal rising with the sun. This year, Jupiter was only 9 degrees away, and Venus was close by in the Crayfish or Cancer constellation, 24 degrees higher. These were two of the most important gods, and it would have been considered very favorable for their close proximity to the king star. The only major god left was the moon god, and the astronomers must have been anxious to see what he would do. On August the 9th, 3 BCE, the moon eclipsed the king star with both Jupiter and Venus close by. Since the prophecy 1400 years earlier, this was only the 55th time that the moon had eclipsed the king star upon its first pass after the star's rising with the sun, and the only time that Jupiter and Venus were nearby. But the moon was not finished showing off. The following day, the moon eclipsed the sun too. This annular solar eclipse was not visible in the Mideast since it occurred in the Pacific off the west coast of Mexico. However, it is likely that the Magi knew it would happen since the Babylonians knew of the 223 synodic month eclipse cycle. To the Babylonians, a solar eclipse meant the death of the king, and with it occurring in the Lion, or Israel, it signified the impending death of King Herod. Then, 2 days later, Venus eclipsed Jupiter. The gods seemed to be in agreement that something important was about to happen. As Jupiter approached the king star, the moon made another pass. On September the 6th, 3 BCE, the moon eclipsed Jupiter. In only 28 days, the moon had eclipsed the king star, the sun, and now Jupiter. And additionally, Venus had eclipsed Jupiter too. This sequence of events had not happened in 1400 years. 8 days later, on September the 14th, 3 BCE, Jupiter made a very close approach to the king star, only 1/3 of a degree away. Now, all the major gods had blessed the king star. As if the Magi weren't excited enough, the drama continued to unfold as they watched the king star in the months to come. On October the 3rd, 3 BCE, the moon eclipsed the king star a second time. It just missed it the following month. But on November 27th, 3 BCE, it eclipsed the king star for a third time. It missed it the next month of December, but now Jupiter had entered retrograde motion and was headed back towards the king star. If the wise men had not already decided to make the journey to Jerusalem, the moon's next pass would have changed their minds. On January the 20th, 2 BCE, a full moon eclipsed the king star for the 4th time, right as the king star was rising in the east at sunset. And this time, Jupiter was only 3 degrees away. A slow-moving caravan can travel 25 miles a day at 2 miles an hour. However, the Magi probably traveled faster than that. The 550-mile trip from Babylonia to Jerusalem would take 22 days. The wise men would arrive at the latest on February the 12th. Let's follow their path with an aerial view of the desert as we hover over a 400-mile long orange sandstorm. And after Yeshua was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, astrologers from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, Where is the one who has been born King of the Jewish people? For we saw his star in the east, and we came to pay homage to him. And when King Herod heard, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. And gathering all the high priests and scribes of the people, he inquired from them where the Messiah was to be born. And they said to him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it has been written through the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, country of Judea, you are by no means least among the princes of Judea, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod, having secretly called the astrologers, ascertained from them the time of the revealing of the star. And sending them to Bethlehem, he said, When you go, you must inquire carefully concerning the child. As soon as you would find him, you must report to me right away. Then when I come, I shall pay homage to him. And lo, the star which they saw in the east led them forth until it came and stood over where the child was. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced with extremely great joy. This view from Jerusalem is what the wise men saw on February the 16th, 2 BCE, that got them so excited. The king's star had just risen in the east at sunset, and right beside it was Jupiter, which had just made its second close approach on this day, just 3/4 of a degree away. The moon was there too, just 3.5 degrees above them. The wise men waited until nightfall to make the 6-mile jaunt to Bethlehem, a trip that would take at most 3 hours. As they traveled due south, they would have seen the king's star to their left in the east, rising in an arc until it too was due south, in the same direction that they were going. At 10:43 p.m., the Jupiter-King star conjunction was due south, 79 degrees high. It would appear to be directly overhead. The star Zeta Leonis in the lion's mane was directly overhead, at the apex of the sky. Then, when they came into the house, they saw the child with Miriam his mother, and having fallen to their knees, they paid homage to him. Then having opened their treasure boxes, they brought gifts to him, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And since they had been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they returned to their country by another way. And after they went away, behold, an angel of the Lord revealed to Joseph in a dream, saying, When you get up, you must immediately take the child and his mother and flee into Egypt. And you must be there until whenever I tell you, for Herod is going to seek to kill the child. Then after he got up, he took the child and his mother in the night and went away to Egypt. On July the 29th, 2 BCE, the king's star rose with the sun again. But this time, Mars was close by, only 3.5 degrees away. The wise men would have deemed this presence of Mars as a bad omen. 2 days later, the moon caused a hybrid total eclipse of the sun right between the king's star and Mars. This eclipse occurred off the west coast of Australia, and it was not visible in Israel. A solar eclipse signified the impending death of the king, and since this eclipse was in the Lion constellation and near the king's star, it meant the imminent death of baby Yeshua. It had been 5 months after the astrologers arrived in Bethlehem. Then, after Herod saw that he was tricked by the astrologers, he became exceedingly angry, and he sent and killed all the male children in Bethlehem and in all the regions of it, from 2 years old and below, according to the time which he ascertained from the astrologers. Now, let's take a look at the significance of September the 14th, 3 BCE. This date has a connection with the gates of heaven being open, a connection with the cross, and a connection with Hanukkah. September the 14th, 3 BCE was when the first Jupiter-King star conjunction occurred. This was the culmination of a sequence of events all pointing to the King star and the birth of the Messiah. So, on the Julian calendar, it was September 14th, but on the Hebrew calendar, it was the 5th day of Tishri, the 7th month. However, this was not the calendar used by the Jews in ancient times. They based their months on observations of the new moon and not on mathematical calculations like today. They could only have started the 7th month when the new moon was visible. Here is the new moon over Jerusalem in 2016 on the first day of the 7th month, which is called Yom Teruah, or the Feast of Trumpets. The moon has to be at least 7 degrees above the horizon at sunset in order to see it with the naked eye. So at sunset on September the 11th, they might have started the new month. Therefore, it is possible that the ancient calendar that they were using showed this date as the 3rd of Tishri. Whatever day the Hebrew calendar was back then, it would have been during the first 10 days of the month. These are known as the days of awe. The first day was Yom Teruah, or trumpets, when the gates of heaven are opened. The 10th day is Yom Kippur, when the gates are closed. It is fitting that the Messiah would be born during this period that the heaven's gates were open. This concept can be seen from Isaiah. Open the gates, that the righteous nation, which keeps the truth, may enter in. Come, my people, enter your chambers, and shut your doors behind you. Hide yourself, as it were, for a little moment, until the indignation is past. Heaven's gates are opened on Yom Teruah. The righteous are gathered into chambers for safe hiding, and then heaven's doors are then shut on Yom Kippur. Isaiah also talks about the dead being raised up at this time, which apparently will happen on Yom Teruah, at the same time that the righteous are gathered into heaven. The Apostle John also talks about the first day of the 7th month. After these things, I looked, and behold, a door standing open in heaven. And the first voice which I heard was like a trumpet, speaking with me, saying, Come up here. There is an open door or gate in heaven. He hears a trumpet because it's Yom Teruah, the Feast of Trumpets, and then John is caught up. This is exactly the same thing that Isaiah told us, except that John adds the sound of a trumpet, showing that it is on Yom Teruah. Yeshua alluded to this same 10-day period with this parable. And while they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the wedding, and the door was shut. Yeshua gives us a hint that he will return during the 10 days of awe, as he says, the bridegroom came. That is Yeshua. He's the bridegroom. And get this, only those who are ready get to go to the wedding in heaven. This is not everyone, and this is not all Christians. It is only the ones he calls his bride, the ones close to him and the ones who are watching for him. This agrees with what Isaiah said, only the righteous enter the gates. And finally, the door or gates are shut, which would be on the 10th of the month on Yom Kippur. Yeshua's birth would not have been on the first day of the 7th month on Yom Teruah, as he was not coming for his bride back then. He was coming to be the Passover lamb, lowly and meek. So it is entirely appropriate that he be born anytime during the open heaven. It is important to realize that Yeshua will return for his bride during the same period that he came the first time. There is a pattern here. Now, if we look back at the Julian calendar, at the Messiah's birth on September the 14th, 3 BCE, and go back exactly 9 months' time to allow for a normal term of pregnancy, we come to December the 14th, 4 BCE. Then, when we look up this date on the Hebrew calendar, we get the 25th of Kislev. This just happens to be the first day of Hanukkah. Now we know why Hanukkah was so special to Yeshua. He even made a visit to the temple in Jerusalem during Hanukkah. It was during this visit that the Jews asked him to quit being vague and tell them who he really was. Just look at what he told them during the 8 days of Hanukkah. I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. Before Abraham was, I am. He almost got stoned for this one. Do you believe in the Son of God? I and my Father are one. He almost got stoned a second time for saying this. Hanukkah was a rough time for Yeshua. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Yeshua said this because he was conceived on Hanukkah. The light of the world came into the world during the Festival of Lights, which is Hanukkah. Going back to Yeshua's birth on September the 14th, 3 BCE, and counting forward the length of time he ministered, 33 years and 7 months, brings us to April the 14th, 32 of the Common Era on the Julian calendar. Now, when we look up this date on the Hebrew calendar, it is exactly the same, the 14th. The 14th of Nisan, which is the first month, is a very special date. It is Passover. However, we know the Jews didn't use this mathematical calendar back then. It was all by observation. So let's take a look at when the new moon would have been first observed. On March 31st at sunset, the new moon was 17 degrees above the horizon. This would have been the first day that you could see the new moon, and therefore the first day of the month of the Hebrew calendar. The first day of April, therefore, was also the first day of the first month on the Hebrew calendar. So the first day of the observational calendar is the same as our mathematical calendar. This means that the 14th of Nisan would definitely have been the actual day that Passover was observed. But there is one small problem. The mathematical rules that are currently used to calculate the Hebrew calendar don't ever allow for a feast day to be on Friday, the day before the Sabbath. This is supposedly to allow people time to properly prepare for the Sabbath. However, we have to consider the 4 different eyewitness accounts of the Gospels, all which agree that the Feast of Unleavened Bread was indeed on a Friday, and not on a Tuesday, as the mathematical calendar would indicate. These new modern rules were not in effect back then. This is what the Hebrew calendar would have looked like. The Passover is still on the 14th, as it always is, but now the 14th is on a Thursday instead of a Monday. A careful reading of all 4 Gospels shows that the Feast of Unleavened Bread was on the day of preparation, the day before the Sabbath. And most importantly, we have Yeshua's own prophecy. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The only way you can get 3 nights into this picture is to have Passover on a Thursday. There was no such thing as a Good Friday. The crucifixion was on a Thursday. Now, it was the 3rd hour, 9 a.m., and they crucified him. Now, from the 6th hour, 12 p.m., until the 9th hour, 3 p.m., there was darkness over all the land. And about the 9th hour, 3 p.m., Yeshua cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani? That is, my God, why have you forsaken me? And Yeshua cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. Yeshua was on the cross for about 6 hours, from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. What is absolutely amazing is that at this exact same time, on the opposite side of the world, there was a total lunar eclipse. This eclipse was not seen in Israel. It happened over the Pacific Ocean. And look at the total length of time from the very beginning of the eclipse to the very end. 5 hours and 45 minutes. The same length of time that Yeshua was on the cross. The total lunar eclipse occurred in the constellation of Libra, the scales of justice. This is because the prince of this world was being weighed in the balance. Satan was about to commit an illegal act. He was going to take a righteous man into hell, a man who had a covenant with God. This would end up costing him his entire kingdom. The Stellarium program shows the total lunar eclipse beginning at 8:35 a.m. Israeli time, At 12 p.m., the moon is in the exact center of the scales of justice. This is when the balance tipped and darkness came over Israel. And at 2:20 p.m., the eclipse ends. Stellarium is only off by 40 minutes. Reconstructing ancient eclipses is not an exact science. We have no precise data prior to the invention of the telescope in 1609. For this eclipse, an estimated adjustment of 2 hours and 50 minutes was subtracted from the calculation to account for a slowing of the Earth's rotation over 2,000 years. So a 40-minute error is well within reason. What can we make of all this amazing data that until now has been hidden in the orbits of the planets? Well, believe it or not, it was there by design. Consider this incredible statement by the Apostle Paul. For there is no distinction between Jew and Greek, for the same Lord over all is rich to all who call upon him. For whoever calls on the name of Jehovah shall be saved. How then shall they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how shall they believe in him of whom they have not heard? And how shall they hear without a preacher? But I say, have they not heard? Yes, indeed. Their sound is gone out to all the earth, and their words to the ends of the world. Paul appears to be saying that everyone has heard about Jehovah, even in cases where no human preacher was ever sent to them. He says that everyone has heard because something has declared God to the whole world. What is he talking about? To find out, we need to reference the verse in Psalms that he quotes. To the chief musician, a psalm of David, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Day into day utters speech, and night into night reveals knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. Both Paul and David are stating that the stars are revealing knowledge about God. Their testimony is as valid as if a human preacher were physically sent. The witness of the heavens is so accurate that the whole world will be held accountable for hearing about Yehovah through the message of the stars. This is an incredible statement. So what have we seen and heard? Let's take a look at the stellar signs of a newborn king in the year 3 BCE. On July 28th, the king star rises with the sun. Jupiter is just 9 degrees away. Venus is 24 degrees away. This hadn't happened in 1400 years. On August the 9th, the moon eclipses the king star. On August the 10th, the moon eclipses the sun. And on August 12th, Venus eclipses Jupiter. And then on September the 6th, the moon eclipses Jupiter. And then on September the 14th, the Jupiter-King star conjunction are 1/3 of a degree apart, symbolizing the birth of the Messiah. Now let's see where September 14th, 3 BCE fits in as the most likely date for the birth of Yeshua. You add 5 months, and the wise men arrive in Bethlehem just in time for Jupiter's second close approach to the king star, 3/4 of a degree apart. You add 10 months and on, and Herod kills the children in Bethlehem, evidenced by a total solar eclipse in between the king star and Mars. You subtract 9 months, and you're on the first day of Hanukkah. The light of the world is conceived on the first day of the Festival of Lights. And then finally, you add 33 years, 7 months, the known length of Messiah's ministry, and you come to Passover, 32 Common Era, with a total lunar eclipse occurring at the same time and for the same duration that Yeshua was on the cross. We have seen the heavens declaring the glory of God. The question now is, will you believe the testimony of the stars?